the summer we have British summertime where we add an hour, and the rest of the world gets really confused that we're not using GMT0. Of course, time is easy to test because of BST and similar other things about geography. What you may find in your software career in your future is you write a test for your time code, and then half a year later it breaks when we hit BST, or you travel to France or across the other direction, and test falls apart. And of course, the beginning of the week varies by country. Commonly either Monday or Sunday, but even within the UK, it is under debate. I think I'm probably the only person in our generation that uses Sunday at the start of my week. Oh, I forgot I added a new one on this slide. It's been 2023 years since AC began. But interestingly, I didn't realize this until very recently, but there is no year 0. The first year in AC was the year 1, which means 2023 is the 2023rd year. But until we reach the end of this year, it's not been 2023 years since time began. Oh, I've got animations. Yeah, here's another one. Human readable dates can be specified in universally understood formats. So a lot of the time, we write our dates with like a few slashes. In England, that makes perfect sense. It's the 5th of August in 2011. But of course, you go over to America, and now suddenly you're looking at the 7th of May. And you're depending on whose computer you're reading it into, maybe it's the 11th of the 7th in 2005. Another one I found really interesting is that leap years. The general assumption is leap years happen every 4 years. Everyone knows that. What a lot of people don't know is unless it's divisible by 100, so the year 2100 is not going to be a leap year. But it is a leap year still if it's divisible by 400. So that's why the year 2000 was still a leap year, but the year 2100 won't be. Of course, well, you probably won't run into too many issues with it. It's more like a one-off thing. It's like the Y2K. You run into this and you go past the turn of the century. Hopefully you'll all get to retire before then, but you never know. So of course, we now go on to the standard that everyone likes, ISO standards, the year, month, date, day. Everyone knows you can sort this one. It works really well. Until you start running into years that happened before the year 1000 or after the year 10,000 in the future. So of course, you now try and sort them alphabetically, and you start running into this. And of course, you might think, we'll just put a 0 at the beginning of the ones which are only 3 characters long, but then you get to the year 10,000, your problem starts all over again. I have fallen for this one many times. I don't know if anyone else does this with like files and things. You just sort your files by alphabetically and put name on them or something like that. So yeah, similarly, a lot of people like to store these as numbers because it's a nice 8, is that 8? Yeah, 8-digit number. Because of course you run into the exact same issue with the pre-appended years. And funnily enough, you get what would be, actually I think that's the year 2023 problem. I think that's a typo, sorry. But yeah, as the year 2023 came around, almost all of Microsoft's Exchange servers crashed because they stored their dates like this with the time, and it takes over the signed integer 32 bits. So there's a new Y2 whatever K problem every year, pretty much. Right, so now we're moving on to some time zone malarkey. Yeah, a lot of people assume that time zones happen every hour. You're +1, +5, +12, and you discover that some places are every half hour, and then you go to Nepal and you discover that some places are every 15 minutes self-sets. And of course, a lot of the time, if you try and write your own time code, you'll adjust by the hour, and then you'll realize later on that you've got to adjust by the minutes as well. This one caught me. A while ago, I proposed a new time standard, following on from the work of Randall Munroe from XKCD. and wrote some software, made a time standard where sunrise is 6 a.m. and sunset is 6 p.m. Which of course breaks as soon as you go to Antarctica, because it turns out that sunrise and sunset are 6 months apart. And my code assumed there was 365 days in a year. Another one, fun one. Friday is always the day before Saturday. Pretty universal fact. The days goes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Unless you happen to be living in Samoa, a small country off to the east of Australia, which one year decided that they were just going to skip Friday for a week. So they have 1 week in their recent past, I think it was 2016, I think it was, where they went from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's an interesting story geographically. So because they're quite close to Australia, Australia originally was their biggest trading partner. So they sat on the west side of the date lines. Their weekdays aligned with Australia. But as time went on, they ended up trading a lot more with the USA. So it made sense for them to switch to the other side of the date line, because of course, when they were trading with the USA, their Monday was the USA's Sunday. I think I'm getting that right way around. And their Thursday was the USA's, no, their Friday was the USA's Thursday. So they only shared 3 business days with the USA. It might be the other way around. Don't want to think about that now. But yeah, so resultantly they decided to switch. They skipped a day so they could align with the USA and move to the other side of the date line. And that way they share 5 business days with the USA and 3 with Australia. But yeah, it is interesting because, of course, now all your time code, if you want it to work in any country in the world, for years before 2016, for historical dates, it now needs to keep track of that day skipped and that time zone shift. Another trap people run into a lot in my industry is daily averages. Daily averages, in general, they're not too bad. They make sense, but what you might run into is weekends exist, and people work Monday to Friday. And if you start averaging things over a week, because the pattern shifts so dramatically between a weekend and a weekday, a lot of the time you find your averages end up much lower than you'd expect, much less useful. We find this a lot of work with our work with pipelines. We're trying to analyze how developers work, how our pipelines get used. And we have data on weekends because our pipelines sometimes run nightly jobs, etc. And it completely messed with a lot of our statistics. And of course, you had the problem of trying to eliminate weekends, which I imagine is probably a fun one if you live in Samoa, because that one time where a Friday didn't happen, you have to eliminate the wrong multiple of 7. Now, a bit of a heavy lean into it, the leap second. I don't know if anyone's heard of a leap second before. So most people know we have a leap day every 4 years, unless it's divisible by 100 or 400. Yeah, so we have leap day because the Earth travels around the sun slightly faster or slightly slower than we want it to match to our nice even number of days. But alongside this, we also have seconds. So the way the Earth spins is slightly slower sometimes, and sometimes slightly faster. So we have to have a leap second. And this causes all sorts of chaos. And it's interestingly, you can't use physics to predict when we're going to need a leap second or not accurately. So it's instead decided by a organization called the IERS, or the International Earth Rotation and Reference Systems Service, I think it is, colloquially referred to as the World Timekeepers, which sounds like something out of Loki to me. So yeah, these people essentially just show up sometimes and say, yeah, so this year we're going to have an extra second. And an interesting thing that's coming up is we're expected to have a negative leap second soon where we skip a second, which has never happened before. So it's quite possible we'll see some software break. So I thought I'd look a little bit about time systems that exist. There's a big range of them because, of course, there's lots of different ways of tracking time. So TIE is probably the one that makes most sense to software engineers. It's a measurement of exactly when seconds happen and how long is between them. It uses atomic clocks, which use radiation from radioactive materials and what monitors their half-life to track time. So all seconds in time are exactly the same length, they're shared across the whole world, and they happen at exactly the same time across the planet. Yeah, obviously there's some variation with latency and things if you're trying to track it exactly. And that makes sense, all the seconds are the same length. And then you have the far opposite, which is UT1, which is what UTC is derived from, which is purely based on the stars and the rotation of the Earth. So the length of a second varies by the second, depending on how fast the Earth is spinning and moving around the sun. Obviously, this isn't really a sane way to keep track of time, and no kind of digital clock can keep track of this. Although if you have a sundial, they're very good at this. Yeah, so the varying length of the second, depending on how fast the Earth's moving, makes it quite difficult to track. So what we end up with is UTC, which is what most of the world uses these days, where all seconds are exactly the same length, tracking time. But in order to keep us closer to the UT1, at the end of the year, sometimes we add a leap second or take away a leap second. And this is what most clocks around the world use these days. And then, of course, because we're in Britain, I can't not cover GMT. So yeah, GMT is an old standard used in the UK based on the Greenwich Mean Line and the position of the sun. And the way it used to work is throughout the day we'd have the same length second up until the last minute of the day, and then the last minute's length was adjusted slightly to keep track with the Earth's rotation, which obviously is, it's insane to have the equivalent of a leap second every day. So we've abandoned that, and these days GMT generally refers to the time zone of UTC 0 rather than the old standard. And something you probably will be familiar with as computer scientists is Unix time. So this is a standard for tracking time and calculating what time it is and what day it is. And it's calculated by looking at the number of seconds since the 1st of January. I don't know why I've written that in the American style. Apologies for that. But yeah, the 1st of January in 1970 at UTC time. So the interesting thing about this is, of course, it's affected by leap seconds in that it accounts for them, so it will skip UTC. So when a UTC has a leap second, epoch will also skip that leap second. And it's not affected by time zones, so it is UTC 0 that it starts at. And you can translate that to your appropriate time zone after, which of course requires a huge table of complication when you have countries like Samoa messing things up with skipping days. Yeah, it's an interesting one because with the leap seconds, the way it tends to work is on the last day of the year, most computers will slow down their time. Some of them will pretend they don't exist and we will be a second out forever. Some of them are just over the year, so you'll find the seconds are slightly out of sync with other computers, depending on the standard that your system uses and what works for your system. Interestingly, with leap seconds, actually, the timekeepers have just had a vote a few weeks ago and have agreed to abandon leap seconds forever. So after year 2035, hopefully we'll see no more leap seconds. I don't know how they plan to deal with the year ending at slightly different seconds. If we have sundown like a second off, like the IRS are gonna go crazy. But there you go. So yeah, here's back to the assumptions again. The current Unix time is the same day as the current UTC time, which is something you would think you could always assume because UTC is based on Unix. But interestingly, because the way Unix time slows down its clocks to match with UTC, sometimes what you can end up with is a Unix time specified at the end of the year, which actually ticks over to the next year or ticks back to the previous year because of the way it interacts with leap seconds. And this can become a nightmare if you're trying to calculate times in the future, because you add the correct number of epochs, seconds, to your current epoch time, and you end up with a date which makes sense, and then the timekeepers announce a leap second and all your times are a bit off. And of course this tends to be fine most of the time, unless you're trying to store just a date and you ignore your minutes, hours and seconds and set them to midnight, and then things can get a bit haywire. And of course, yeah, following on from the leap seconds, this means derivatively a minute no longer always has exactly 60 seconds. Sometimes it has 60 seconds, which are all slightly longer than a normal second, which means you can't just use the time to keep a stopwatch, for example. So if you want an accurate stopwatch you can't look at exactly how many seconds it's been since you started it. You need to actually measure the amount of time that's passed since you started it. Which is something which probably, in my opinion, has messed up the odd science experiment here and there. No one's noticed. There you go. So yeah, another fun one. The year always has 365 or 366 days. Did I do that right around 8 seconds? I don't know. The numbers are swimming now. But anyway, yeah, it's an interesting one. Is in Sweden in 1712, they just had a year with 367 days. Because it turns out, like, a lot of the time, like, these countries end up becoming more globalized. They try and sync their time systems with the rest of the world's calendar. And what ends up happening with these kind of things is a lot of time they try and adjust, rather than having a certain moment where they say, after this day we're using the new calendar. They say, this year we're going to have an adjustment year where we change things up a bit, and then we'll go to the new calendar. So you end up with countries like Sweden having a 367-day year. And yeah, coming towards the end of this, another assumption we like to make is that time is easy with the library. So for the many reasons you may have seen above, you can imagine that you can try your best to automate as much of this away as possible, but in the end, some level the software engineer has to keep track of all these issues if they want their time to be rendered correctly. And of course, another assumption is that all our time systems will carry on being the same. They change so often. As I said, leap seconds, as of a few months ago, will no longer be a thing. And this presentation was written before that vote was announced. But there you go. But things change all the time, which means there's going to be adjustments. There's going to be new tables. There's going to be new leap seconds to keep track of, and new translations to make between old software. So if you're getting good at this stuff, you can probably get paid quite a lot to adjust old time systems to the new ones. We've got things like the Y2K38 bug coming up, where it's going to be a repeat of the Y2K bug, where everything falls apart in the year 2038. So you can probably rip a bunch of companies off to charge them for migrating their time code. And yeah, that's it for my rant about time. I hope it was interesting. Yeah, we're, as I said earlier, we are hiring. If you haven't got a leaflet from me already, please come and collect one. We are very interested in graduates. These kind of talks we have lots of time for within our company. We have lots of people showing up things they're interested in, anything from a dwarf fortress presentation to the next technology that everyone wants to use. So yeah, thank you very much for coming and listening to my rant. Are there any questions about time or weird things that I said that you're curious about? Sorry? How many hours of debugging do you think you spend? Leap seconds I have not had too many issues with in my work. Most of my work is not second level critical. I did spend a solid 2 days trying to figure out a bug once where all my dates had shifted back by 1 day, and that was because of a leap second. Next, anything else? Yeah. Well, it depends on the language. Java has the good old datetime library, which is a mess, but does mostly work. JavaScript, you've got moment, which is deprecated, so you should never use anymore because the tables are getting outdated. There's a new one, which I cannot remember the name of, which is replacing it. The standard date library in JavaScript is dangerous and scary, but you have to use it at some point, so it's worth learning if you're ever going to use JavaScript. But yeah, there's no standard library which I can concisely say can deal with all these problems for you. Yeah. Right, cool. Well, thank you very much.
I'm thinking and I'm thinking of you, 'cause I'm missing you and all the things you do. I can't stop thinking, I can't stop thinking, thinking, and I'm thinking of you. So much thinking, and it's got me low. Thinking, and I'm thinking of you. So much thinking, and it's got me low. Thinking of you. Too many thoughts in my head, I'm confused. Overthinking is all I can do. Overthinking is making me blow. Thinking of you. Too many thoughts in my head, I'm confused. Overthinking is all I can do. Overthinking is making me blow. Thinking, and I'm thinking of you. So much thinking, and it's got me low. Thinking, and I'm thinking of you. So much thinking, and it's got me low. Thinking, and I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of thinking, and I'm thinking of you. Thinking, and I'm thinking of thinking, and I'm thinking of thinking, and I'm thinking of you.
I'm going outside to take it away. You say too late to stop, got your heart in a hand. I don't believe any of it. You say too late to stop, with a heart in a hand. I don't believe any of it.